Our company in Hickory, North Carolina told me not ever to try doing water skiing again, because every time I did, the lake went down 4 inches because I couldn't keep my mouth closed when I fell. So they decided that they didn't want me doing that. So I can't walk on water. I've seen some of these things on television where these dogs and other animals make noises that sound like talking, but this was a conversation that took place. And I wanted to share that with you because I think there's some good lessons that are here. We're going to be reading from Numbers, the 22nd chapter, and we're going to read quite a few verses just to set up everything that I want to say for you today. And if you want to turn in your Bible and look and follow along, or if you want to follow on the screen, that's fine, either one. Now, to set the stage for all of this taking place, the children of Israel had been encamped at Mount Sinai. God had given them the 10 Commandments. He had given them all of the over 600 separate laws of dietary and dress and worship and everything that he wanted them to have. And they are moving along toward entering what is called the Promised Land, into the Canaan land. Now, you have to remember that there weren't any roads in that day and time, and the children of Israel, as they left the Sinai desert, would go to what you and I would, if we were looking at a map, go to the right-hand side or the eastern side of the Dead Sea, and to prepare themselves to cross the Jordan River at Jericho. And Jericho's on the northern end of the Dead Sea. I have a map that'll show you this in a little while. And Moab, the nation of Moab, or the country of Moab, is basically all of that eastern side of the Dead Sea. And so let's read together as all of this gets set up. The children of Israel set forward, and they pitched in the plains of Moab on this side Jordan by Jericho. And Balak, the son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was greatly afraid of the people because they were so many. And Moab was distressed because of the children of Israel. Now, when he talks about the great number of Israelites, when you start dealing with the book of Numbers and the numbering of the people of Israel itself, you begin to understand that there was somewhere between 1 million and 2 million of these people that were traveling through the desert. And that's sort of like taking twice the number of people in Knoxville and moving them from Knoxville to Chattanooga on foot. And you can understand the problems that would exist because of that. So Moab said to the elders of Midian, and Midian was a little further to the east, "Now shall this company lick up all that are round about us, as the ox licks up the grass of the field?" And Balak, the son of Zippor, was the king of the Moabites at that time. And he sent messengers therefore to Balaam, the son of Beor of Pethor, which is by the river of the land of the children of his people, to call him and say, "Behold, there's a people that have come out of Egypt. Behold, they cover the face of the earth, and they abide over against me." Now, it's kind of interesting, I think, here that this man knows where these people have come from, whether he has sent spies down or whether there have been parties that have gone out from the Israelites looking through the land and met folks and talked to them. We don't know, but he knows there's a lot of them. He knows they have come from Egypt. "Come now, therefore, I pray you, and curse for me this people, for they're too mighty for me. And peradventure I shall prevail, and we can overcome them or smite them, that I can drive them out of the land. For I do not know that he whom you bless, for I do know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed." So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the rewards of divination in their hand. These are bribes or gifts. They came to Balaam, and they spoke unto him the words of Balak. And he said unto him, Launch here this night, and I'll bring you word again as the Lord shall speak unto me. And the princes of Moab abode with Balaam. And God came to Balaam and said, What men are these with you? And Balaam said unto God, Which Balak the son of Zippor, the king of Moab, has sent unto me, saying. Now, it's interesting to note that Balaam has a connection to God. And the only thing that I can figure out is when you go back to the time of Abraham. Abraham had a son, Ishmael, by Sarah's handmaid Hagar. And God promised that from him would also arise a great nation of people. Not only did Jacob have 12 sons, but Ishmael had 12 sons also. And there seems to have been some kind of connection of God to the Ishmaelites, because they worshiped God, and we don't know a lot about them, and the reason we don't is because the Bible gives us the lineage of Jesus through Jacob. And so that's why we don't know much about the Ishmaelites. One of the few things that we know about the Ishmaelites is that they bought Joseph and took Joseph down into Egypt. And other than that, we don't know an awful lot about these Ishmaelites. But they're kinfolks to the Jews, or the children of Jacob. First cousins. Or first half cousins, I guess. It says, Behold, there is a people that come out of Egypt, and this is what Balaam is telling God that Balak told him. Now, it's hard to when you're dealing with two names that are close in sounds, to remember which one it is. Balaam is the prophet. Balak is the king of Moab. This people have come out of Egypt because they cover the face of the earth. They now come and curse for me them. And peradventure I'll be able to overcome them and drive them out. So God said to Balaam, You shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people, because they are blessed. So Balaam got up in the morning and said to the princes of Balak, Go back to your land, because the Lord refuses to give me permission to go with you. And the princes of Moab rose up. They went back to Balak, and they said, Balaam refuses to come with us. And so Balak sent again other princes, even more honorable than they. When you're dealing in foreign relations, you start out on one level, and if that doesn't work, you get somebody that's more important, and you send them. And if that doesn't work, you finally get to the top of this. All the negotiations that are going on right now with North and South Korea through the United States are done on lower level emissaries right now. And coming up in June, the highest level, the presidents of 3 different countries will meet, and hopefully there'll be some things that will be resolved. So even back as far as this period of time, that same kind of negotiations was taking place. So they came to Balaam and said this to him. This is what Balak the son of Zippor says. Let nothing, I pray you, hinder you from coming to me, for I will promote you unto very great honor, and I will do whatever you say to me. Come therefore, I pray you, curse this people for me. So Balaam answered and said to the servants of Balak, If Balak would give me his house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond the word of the Lord my God to do more, or to do less or more. How honorable this sounds at this particular point. And what a great man this appears to be. Now, he says, I pray you, wait here also this night, that I can know what the Lord will say unto me even more. So God came to Balaam that night and said to him, if the men come to call you, rise up and go with them, and yet say only the word which I say unto you is that which you shall say. So God first of all tells Balaam, says, don't go with them. Now he says, all right, if they beg you to go, then you go, but you don't say anything unless I tell you what to say. That gets a lot of folks in trouble sometimes. They don't get the message just exactly right. So Balaam rose up in the morning, he saddled his donkey, and he went with the princes of Moab. And God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the way for an adversary against him. Now notice the change on this. God had said, if they ask you to go, and evidently Balaam takes that and saying, okay, I'll go with them, making it different. They're here. That's what they've come for. And so he makes a decision on it. He gets up, he saddles the donkey, and he takes off with them. So this upsets God. He was riding upon his donkey, and two servants were with him. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his sword drawn in his hand. The donkey turned aside and went into the field. Balaam struck the donkey, turned her back into the path. But the angel of the Lord stood in the path of the vineyards. Wall being on this side and wall on that side. The donkey saw the angel of the Lord. She thrust herself against the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall, and he struck her again. You can just see Balaam down on this donkey. He's probably as big, if not bigger than the donkey. And the donkey sees the angel and swerves to one side and mashes his foot against the wall. He gets upset. He whacks the donkey with his rod. The angel of the Lord went further and stood in a narrow place where there's no way to turn either to the right or to the left. The donkey saw the angel of the Lord. She fell down under Balaam. Balaam's anger was so kindled that he smote the donkey with a staff. And the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you should smite me these 3 times? Balaam said to the donkey, because you mocked me. And I would if there was a sword in my hand, and I'd kill you. The donkey said to Balaam, am I not your donkey upon which you have ridden ever since I was yours unto this day? Was I ever wont to do so unto you? And he said, no. And so the Lord opened the eyes of Balaam, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand, and he bowed down his head, and he fell flat on his face. The angel of the Lord said to him, why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, I went out to stand in your way because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned away from me these 3 times. And if she hadn't turned away from me, surely now I would have killed you and saved her life. And Balaam said unto the angel of the Lord, I've sinned. For I did not know that you stood in the way against me. And now therefore, if it displeases you, I'll go home again. And the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, you go with the men, but only speak the word that I shall speak to you, that shall you speak. And so Balaam went with the princes of Balak. So this is, we'll be finished with the reading at the end of this one right here. So when King Balak heard that Balaam had come to him, he went out to meet him in the city of Moab, which is in the border of Arnon, which is a river, which is in the utmost coast. And Balak said to Balaam, did I not earnestly send unto you to call you? Why didn't you come? Am I not able indeed to promote you to honor? And Balaam said to Balak, lo, I have come to you, and now have I now any power at all to say anything? The word that God puts in my mouth is what I shall speak. So Balaam went with Balak, and they came unto Kirjath-Huzoth. Aren't you glad we don't name towns like this anymore? Balak offered oxen and sheep, and sent to Balaam and to the princes that were with him. And it came to pass on the next day that Balak took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal, that he might see the utmost part of the people. Now, Balaam gets a chance to see all of these people that are encamped there getting ready to cross the Jordan River into the Promised Land. Well, one thing that I think we can always get clear of most of these incidents in the Scriptures, and even though they're unusual, God takes care of his people with a talking donkey. This is a very strange story of Balaam and the talking donkey. Many times we read the Scriptures and we don't really get the insight that is really there. This makes a real good children's story. Here's a man who tried to play both sides of the fence. He first of all tells the king, I can't do this. I can't curse these people because God won't let me. And then he goes down there to talk to him. And he sees the people and things begin to change. He's a prophet that is basically hired to curse God's people. And then we see in the end of this that the enemies of God's people are foiled again because God always takes care of his people. Regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the turmoil, regardless of the enmity or the troubles that we face, God is going to take care of us. Now, we look at this and we say, okay, this is very strange that a donkey would talk. But did you know that talking donkeys are not new or strange to us today? Have you ever thought about that? How many of you remember the Pooh books? Remember Eeyore? Poor Eeyore under a black cloud. Poor Eeyore is always one of those. The terrible things happen to him and nothing is going good. But he's just a talking donkey. And what about the more modern ones? You remember the Shrek movies? And here's Donkey. Anybody remember what his name was? He was called Donkey, wasn't he? Is that what he's called? That's what I thought. Yeah. I was trying to remember for certain who this was. But he talked. He talked way too much most of the time. Okay. Now, so what do we know about Balaam? First of all, he was the son of Beor. Who was Beor? Well, we don't know except that he was the father of Balaam. And he was endowed with the gift of prophecy. And he was endowed with the gift, evidently, of cursing and blessing, whatever that particular thing entailed. The words had, his actions and his words had reached the king of Moab. And so he says, whoever you curse is cursed, and whoever you bless is blessed. Do you ever remember that statement anywhere in the Scriptures? You have to go all the way back to Abraham. And God promises him, whoever you bless, I will bless, and whoever you curse, I will curse. So I assume, because of this, that Balaam is probably an Ishmaelite. And that he's being able to quote what great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather Abraham was told. He lived in Pethor in Moab near the river. He was a Midianite or an Ishmaelite. He was basically called a seer. This is one who could prophesy. He had a connection with God. He was known by the king of Moab, Balak, and he had some sort of communication with the God of heaven. We know that he was tempted to sell his commitment to God for prizes offered by the king. We know that he became angry, that he did not know that he was in a conversation with the donkey. Did you ever talk to yourself? Most of us have. It's not so bad until you start answering yourself. And you think that you've got a doppelganger that's there, that's just yourself that you make a conversation with. But can you imagine the man, he gets so mad that he starts this conversation with the animal that he's riding on, and he doesn't even realize that he's talking to a donkey. He was blinded to the truth because of greed. He refused to curse God's people because God told him not to do so in the beginning. And later he caused Israel to sin by getting them to adopt immoral ceremonies of the heathen tribes of the Canaan land. Now we're not going to get into that. Our lesson won't take us quite that far. And so he succumbs to the gifts that Moab wants to present upon him. And as a result, instead of cursing the people, he gets them to adopt some of the ways of the Moabites, which were one of those tribes of the Canaan land that should have been wiped out and weren't. Later on, he was killed by the Israelites along with the leaders of the defeated tribes. So he gets his in the end, and that's the way it goes. Now, where was Moab? Here's our map of Israel. And if you notice, down in the lower end down here, here's where Moab is. Now, Moab actually is all of this land up through here. Now, here's the Arnon River where Balak met Balaam. And the children of Israel were evidently encamped somewhere along in this area. And here is where they're going to cross the Jordan River. Jericho sits right about here. And that's their first target as they go into the Promised Land. So that gives you sort of a rough idea of where we're talking about today. Okay, we asked the question, what wrong did Balaam do? Well, he wasn't completely honest with God. And what do we mean by not being honest with God is that in the beginning, he listened to what God said. And then he began to take upon himself to do some things. One was not waiting till the people invited him like God told him to. And he saddled his donkey in the morning and took off and went with them. And he tried to play both sides. He tried to be on God's side and he tried to be on Moab's side. And in doing this, he was playing one side against the other. A dangerous thing when you're dealing specifically with God. The scriptures tell us that we don't need to be afraid of what man can do to us, but we need to be understanding of what God could do to us. He wanted to be a friend to both sides, and that doesn't really work. Matthew 6, 21 through 24 says, "For where your treasure is, there's where your heart's going to be. The light of the body is the eye, and if therefore your eye is single or one or unified, then your whole body shall be full of light. But if your eye is evil, your whole body shall be full of darkness. And if therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Because no man can serve two masters. He'll either hate the one and love the other, or he'll hold to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, which is also translated as riches." The one thing that Balaam wanted was the honor and the prestige and the promotion that the king of Moab wanted to give him, and also the money that evidently was there. So we're warned even from what Jesus says that we need to be very careful. We cannot serve two masters. All right. What else did he do? He greedily wanted the gifts of Balak, and he was hypocritical in his stand with God, God's people, and his own people. So this is also depicted for us in the scriptures, and it comes from Matthew the 7th chapter. "Judge not that you be not judged, for with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged. It's kind of interesting because a little bit later on we're told we're to be fruit inspectors. And with what measure you give out, it shall be measured to you again. And why do you behold the mote that is in your brother's eye, or the little splinter, but you do not consider the beam that is in your own eye? Some people say two before. How will you say to your brother, let me pull the mote out of your eye, and behold, the beam is in your own eye? You hypocrite, first cast out the beam of your own eye, and then you shall see clearly to cast out the mote out of your brother's eye. We can sum all of this up. It says, be sure that you've got your own ducks in line before you start lining up other people's ducks. We oftentimes, and as a preacher, I've tried to get people to see this oftentimes. The reason we can see sins and difficulties in other people's lives is because we've got them in our life. And that's why they're easy to spot. And oftentimes we point out somebody else's sins and faults becomes a smoke screen to hide ours. And so I think this is what he's talking about here. We have to be very careful in what we do in life in trying to straighten out other people's problems. Is that, first of all, we need to be sure that our problems are straightened out, first of all with God and also with our fellow man. What else did Balaam do wrong? He failed to wait until God had spoken before he acted. We have an example of this in the scriptures in 1 Samuel 15. You probably remember this. Saul had gone down to fight the Amalekites. Samuel, who was the great prophet at that time, had told Saul, the king, you wait until I get there and I offer sacrifice, and then you go and fight the Amalekites. Saul was so excited about going and fighting them, he just took off on his own, and he went and fought them and defeated them. And this is what this story is here for us. Samuel came to Saul, and Saul said unto him, blessed are you of the Lord, for I have performed the commandment of the Lord. Samuel said, so then what means this bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of the oxen that I hear? God had told him to go down and destroy the Amalekites, kill everything, kill the men, the women, the children, all the animals, just wipe everything out. Saul says, I've brought them from the Amalekites because the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice unto the Lord your God, and the rest we have utterly destroyed. Notice he does not say the Lord my God. He says the Lord your God. He's trying to put this on the shoulders of Samuel himself. So Samuel said to Saul, shut up, be quiet, and I'll tell you what the Lord has said to me this night. And Saul said, go on. And Samuel said, when you were little in your own sight, were you not made the head of the tribes of Israel, and the Lord anointed you king over Israel? And the Lord sent you on a journey and said, go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed, totally destroyed. Why then did you not obey the voice of the Lord? And why did you fly upon the spoil and did evil in the sight of the Lord? They weren't even to take a change of clothes, to kill all of everything that was alive and burn everything else in the land of the Amalekites. So Saul said to Samuel, yes, I've obeyed the Lord of the Lord, and I've gone the way which the Lord sent me, and I have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took the spoil and the sheep and the oxen and the chief of the things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice unto the Lord your God in Gilgal. Gilgal is important because this is where the tabernacle sat. This is before the time that the temple was built in Jerusalem, and the tabernacle was at Gilgal. So Samuel says, has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices he has as in the obeying of the voice of the Lord? Behold, It is better to obey than to sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. It's better to obey, and it's better to listen than to offer sacrifice and the fat of lambs. For the rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is the same as iniquity and idolatry. And because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being the king. And Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned. Did you notice what Balaam said when the angel was finally revealed to him? I have sinned. Saul says, I have sinned. Later on, David says, I have sinned, because I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and your words, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Well, I hope that in your mind that you got the picture of Balaam riding his donkey going down to see the king of Moab. Here he is riding his donkey on the road. So what happened when the donkey spoke? I've got a grand dog. And a lot of you know what a grand dog is. That's the dog that your grandchildren have. It's almost on a level with your grandchildren. And this grand dog of mine belongs to my daughter. And one weekend we were going to keep Peanut. And Gabe, our son-in-law, was bringing Peanut over in the car, had the window rolled down. You know how dogs like to stick their head out and let their ears flap in the breeze. And as she got close to our house, right at the end of the house that's up the street from us, she got so excited about going to our house that she jumped out of the car. Well, son-in-law thought she was going to be dead when he got the car stopped. But she had just a few little scrapes. She jumped up, she ran to our house. And she's always so delighted to see us for some reason. And she's delighted to come and spend a week at our house when our daughter and family are gone somewhere. And she's just at home at our house as she is at her own house. But she's always glad to go home. She doesn't talk, but she does bark. And she does whine. And she lets us know what she needs. But I've never heard her carry on a conversation with me yet. God gave a specific message to Balaam. As he is on his way, the donkey sees an angel and ends up crushing his foot against the rock wall. And Balaam gets so angry that he does not understand that he was conversing with the donkey. And the donkey says, "Well, why are you beating me?" "Because you've mocked me." And the donkey says, "Well, I've been faithful to you. What have I ever done to you? Have I ever rebelled against you?" "No." This guy is really angry. I mean, he's so upset he doesn't recognize this. And then he sees the angel, he bows his head, and he falls to the ground. And he says, "I have sinned." You know how many times that phrase is used in the scriptures? Have you ever thought about it? 6 times. And all of the history from Adam and Eve to the end of the book of Revelation. Now, wouldn't that say that there might be a problem somewhere with humanity of being able to say, "I've sinned, I've done wrong, I've gone against God, and I've gone against myself"? One that comes close to it is not the same thing is in Joseph in the house of Potiphar, when Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him, and he says, "I can't do this because I would be sinning against God." And Balaam says, if you let me go, I'll go back home. I'll behave. Isn't it interesting that sometimes that when we get caught at something, we're willing and ready to do whatever we should have been doing to start with. And so he was told to go with the men from Moab, but only speak what the angel tells him. Well, what are the lessons for us today? Sometimes we behave more stupidly than do dumb animals. Have you ever noticed how that mankind does sometimes? Hey, y'all, watch this. I'm going to back that up. We kind of do some dumb things once in a while, and that's one of those dumb things that's there. Well, what else do we do besides behaving more stupidly than dumb animals? Sometimes we cannot see what we ought to see. And it takes somebody to help point that out for us. In the book of Mark in the 8th chapter, the disciples had forgotten to take bread, and neither had they in the ship with them any more than just one loaf. And so Jesus charged them. He said, "Take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod." And they reasoned among themselves, he's saying this because we don't have any bread. And when Jesus understood that, he said unto them, "Why do you think this because you have no bread? Do you not yet see and neither understand? Is your heart still hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? Do you not remember that when I broke the 5 loaves among the 5,000, how many baskets full of fragments you took up?" And they said, 12. "And then the 7 among 4,000, how many baskets and fragments did you take up?" And they said, "Well, 7. And he said unto them, "How is it that you do not understand?" Do you ever figure out why that preachers have to preach on the same subject again and again and again and again and again? A fellow asked the preacher one time after he'd preached an hour and a half, he says, "Well, why do you have to preach so long?" He says, "Because there's a lot of sin out there. And people haven't really given themselves over to God like they really should have." How is it that you do not understand? We live in a day and a time in which people are rejecting the Bible hand over foot and rejecting God and rejecting religion and worship. And all they want to do is to be entertained. You see, worshiping God is a very sacred and a very solemn event. And it can be also a very exciting event too. So sometimes do we not only that, but we also have to be aware of the blessings and the penalties God has given us. We have to remember the goodness and the severity of God. And so we need to remember this. So we have to also remember that God also provides some very strange ways to teach man his lesson. He prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And finally, remember that God always takes care of his people. God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted above that which you're able, but also make a way of escape that you'll be able to handle it. Talking donkeys are not new or strange to us today. What do you see and listen to today? My prayer for you is that you see God for who he is and that you listen to him. Thank you.